Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a Friday afternoon here at the Toronto Sports Card Expo. My name is Sean Mitten, author of The Goal That United Canada, When Canada Shut Down. And I'm really proud to have beside me here Mike Wilson, also known as the Ultimate Leaf Fan. And if you're a collector and you know all about collecting, you want to hear this guy here, Mike, because he's got some great stories. We only have, less than an hour, but if we had all weekend, I'm sure we could fill it with stories, Mike. So first of all, great to have you here today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Sean. Great to be here.
Now, when you think about being a collector, right, it always starts with a passion. So I want to start with that, Mike. And I know you're the Ultimate Leaf Fan, but how did you get to be the Ultimate Leaf Fan? What was the genesis for you in your journey?
Well, quite honestly, all it was I just started like any guy growing up in the late 50s and 60s, was collecting hockey cards and coins and clipping articles out of a newspaper and just things like that. And it just exploded into what it became today. And as I got more money, I bought more things. And, then he came around and did a story on me, and ESPN contacted me and were looking for crazy fans. And they sent a photographer up and they labeled me as the Ultimate Leaf Fan. And I never thought of myself as that. But they gave me the name, and I just kept it. We kept it for branding. We actually were thinking of changing it because we want to do a lot of charity work and hold events and hockey events along those lines with our room. But we decided since the name was sticking, we just left it.
Gotcha. When you think about the early days, like which teams were your teams and which guys were your guys? Like who was that back in for you?
Well, you got to remember, it's the Toronto Maple Leafs. I grew up in Toronto. My dad was a Leaf fan. St. Mike's was our other team, which was also the Toronto Marlboros. And the Saturday night hockey game came on at 9 o'clock in my day, and that's when I'd be able to stay up and watch one period. So you're out on the street, and everybody's pretending you're Dave Keon or Frank Mahovlich or whoever your other player was. The Maple Leafs were your heroes. And there was 120 players in the league, and I don't think there's a guy in the street that couldn't name every player in every team. So not like today, but back in that era, it was so much different. And you could just associate and resonate with every team. But the Leafs were obviously my team.
The younger generation today is kind of spoiled from the perspective they can go and watch any game at any time or check the internet. And back then we had Hockey Night in Canada, right? So that was a big deal. We stayed up. That was a big deal for us to watch them on Saturday nights.
Oh, that was it, because it'd be one game a week Saturday night, and that would be, you'd wait all week. You'd play your house league game in the morning. You'd play on the street or at the schoolyard on the rink in the afternoon. And if you're allowed to stay up and you were good throughout the week, you could watch the game Saturday night, and that was pretty much it.
Those were definitely great times, and it also created an imagination, because then you could think about your favorite guys, but you didn't know all about them like you did today with all the media that we have. I want to share with everybody that the room that Mike's talking about, there's no words that can do it justice, and I've attended there a few times, and maybe talk, Mike, first about your initial things that you collected and how that led to this room. What were some of the first Toronto pieces that you got?
Well, the first real piece I got of memorabilia was my dad's cousin was best friends with Carl Brewer, and they were going to go in the monastery together. And he found out that I was a young guy playing hockey and was a Maple Leaf fan, so he got me a game-used Carl Brewer stick. And that's what started. And I used to take it out in the street and put it on the grass for everybody to look at. And that was it. And but I didn't think anything of it. It was just a stick, but it was signed by the Maple Leafs, and it was my pride and joy. And the second piece I got was the Frank Mahovlich Libby's Beans poster, which was a promotion at Dominion. And my uncle got me 2 posters, and one of them we gave to Frank Mahovlich's father, who was the skate sharpener at Leaside Arena. My dad played there Sunday mornings, and we gave Mr. Mahovlich the poster, and it hung in his shop until the day he retired. And I remember, fast forward 50 years, and Frank visiting the room and showing him the Libby's Bean display and the poster, and he said, my dad has this in his shop, and we have family pictures of him with that in the background. And when I informed Frank and gave it to him, he kind of welled up talking about his father and thinking of the memories. So that was a round tripper for me. So those were the 2 first real pieces, and it just kind of went from there.
Gotcha. Now, I guess in some ways, with all the pieces that I've seen and witnessed, everyone in some ways has a story, right? And so as a collector, there's certainly a valuation to it, but at the same time, there's a heartfelt aspect. Maybe share a couple of the pieces that really there's a great story in your mind that you think about when you think about some of the items you collected over the years.
Well, the funny thing is everybody, the first time anybody comes to my room, they always ask what's the most expensive thing. And that's what they think is the most valuable. But I always say to them, look, every piece in the room has a story to it, and every piece in the room means as much to me as the next. And I'd said to them, look, if I was a young kid, if I wasn't 5 or 6, 7, 8 years old, waiting for my mom to come home from shopping and getting the Jello boxes and taking sheriff coins out of them, or the marbles out of the cereal boxes, or cutting the pictures off the back of the cereal box, the Chuck's boxes, and clipping the articles out of the paper, the rest of it wouldn't have even come into place. So that's what started it all, and that's where the passion began, and it just developed from there. So those early pieces are what were really significant to me. And I look at them today, and you look at the coins and the marbles and all that stuff, and that's really, it just takes you right back to that moment in time. And then again, you associate that with your family and your Saturday afternoons. Remember, the newspapers didn't come out till the afternoon in those days, not in the morning.
Right.
So you'd have to wait till 4 or 5 in the afternoon, get the paper and cut the articles out, and it just led from there. So, some of the pieces over the years, I remember I had, the first time I toured the Maple Leaf Gardens as a young kid, we went to the Maple Leaf dressing room, and I remember standing in a few games we'd go to a year, that door would fly open, and Elise would come out, and both teams dressed on the same side of the gardens at that time, one on one side and the opposing team on the other side. And I'd always wait, and we'd have to stand behind a rope, and then they'd go out on the ice sort of warm up and go and watch it. And I remember then with the tour going through that door and going in the room, and the first sweater I saw was George Armstrong's. And I don't know why, and he wasn't my favorite player, and I went right to that sweater because I thought maybe they'd kick us out of the room. And I remember staring at that sweater, and again, fast forward, 50 years, I had that exact sweater in my room, and the door was in my basement as well. So I own both pieces. Now, would I ever have dreamt that would ever have been possible? Never. So I'd have to say, looking back on my childhood, those are two pieces that really stuck with me, and I had to pinch myself at times when I looked at them and the memories came back.
That's amazing. Not many people get that experience.
No.
Now, on the other side of things, we have a lot of collectors in the building today, but not everybody has the background that you have as experience from a finance standpoint of working on Wall Street and not on Wall Street, but on Bay Street, excuse me. But understanding the valuation of things, and that kind of played probably a little bit of a role in understanding when to buy things and understand the valuations. I'm sure that must have been an interesting part for you.
Yes and no. Yeah, as I got older, you had more money, you had more disposable income, and you could buy things that maybe you couldn't afford when you were much younger. But the idea is you're buying things for a reason. You wouldn't buy that bag for not having a reason for owning it, or that table or this chair. Right. So any piece that you're looking at, if it doesn't have a good story attached to it, why would you buy it? It's just something you're going to stick in a wall or sit in a corner on a table. If it doesn't have a meaning to you or a story to it, it means nothing. Right. So having said that, anytime I ever bought something, there would be some meaning to me or some significant moment historically or maybe memorably that they would attach me to that, and that's why I would want to have it. There's nothing to do with the monetary value, and anything I ever bought had nothing to do with money. And anytime anybody tells me they're buying something for a reason to make money, they're telling me, I might as well stop right there, because the easy money's already been made in whatever you're purchasing. You're not going to make any money in it in this day and age. Buy it for the right reason. Buy it because you enjoy the player, you like the team, you like the sport. It's a memorable moment. Everything I've just mentioned, buy it for that reason. And whatever happens after that, hopefully it works out for you.
That's a great lesson for a lot of collectors, right?
Yeah.
Do it for the right reasons. And so if you do that, you can't go wrong if you're doing it for the right reasons. Now, years ago, I initially met you through a gentleman named Paul Patskow, who we know as a great hockey historian and one of the founders of the Hockey Time Machine. And Paul is a great guy, and during that time, we met in your basement, which when I went down the stairs, and I'll never forget going downstairs for the first time and just saying, wow, this is like hockey heaven. It's just an incredible experience. But maybe speak to some of the events that you've had over the years of having unique, some of the great hockey players of all time, and the benefits of some of the different charities that you help support. I think there's some wonderful stories maybe you could share on that, Mike.
Well, that's what we're most proud of, is the fact that the room has been able to use to help others. And it's funny, when the room was first built, all I really wanted, and quite frankly, was just a room to display my items, have some TVs, a bar, and a beer fridge that was full, and invite my buddies over to watch games, and that was really it. And somebody mentioned that we should be doing something on a charity basis, and I thought, no, who would come here? Nobody wants to come and see this. Yeah. And I really thought that. And then the Leafs, somehow some pictures got out, and the Leafs contacted me and did something for Leafs TV. And then all of a sudden we started getting requests for people wanting to come and see it. So we at first said no. And then we made a decision that if we're going to do this, let's do it for the right reason and try and help people. And the way we tried to attach to it so that we wouldn't say no to anybody was there always had to be a Toronto Maple Leaf involved. And on that basis, we went forward from there. And then the Maple Leafs, led by guys like, there's over 85 Maple Leafs come to our house. And Brendan Shanahan was a big player who supported everything we did. Brian Burke, we did a number of things for bullying with him. Wayne Gretzky stepped right up and helped us whenever we needed something or something donated and actually attended an event. Bobby Orr was another one. And I always used to think it was because of me, but it wasn't because of me. It was because, it was because of Debbie, mostly they wanted to come and see, or the event. But it was the NHL hockey players who stepped right up. All I did was open the door, shake somebody's hand, start telling stories, and get them a beer. All the hard work was done by these guys. But we did everything. We helped ALS, we helped Heart and Stroke. We did something for, as I mentioned, for bullying. We did things for autism. We did something for our Canadian Olympic athletes, which we're really proud of, where we helped a lot of the kids raise money. We did things for MLSA Foundation. So we've done, I think we held at one time, Paul Pasco kept track of everything. The guys like Paul who would track down people, Debbie doing a lot of the work, and a lot of the charities they work with, a lot of work for us. I would say that over the years, with the help of everybody, we raised over $2 million.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. And, I'll also say I recall a night being there on the 40th, prior to the 40th anniversary of the Paul Henderson goal in 2012. You were kind enough to host a small party, and that evening we had Bob Cole down there. We had Steve Dowling, who was a ref from the 72 series. Bill Viggers, who was a key part of the Terry Fox run, was down there. And, when I think about that, just from that evening alone, the stories that were shared just from that one evening, and that's really compounded with all the times that you've had events. I mean, it's just incredible.
Well, that's the benefit for me being the host, is the fact that I got these wonderful athletes. We had billionaires, rock musicians, just people of celebrity coming down and seeing their reaction. And the idea is this is the beauty of collecting, is they would see something on the wall and then they would share, that reminds me of this story. And I'll tell you one very quick story. Wayne Gretzky came down and had a picture of him breaking Gordie Howe's scoring record, and it was a Leroy Neiman seriograph. And underneath it, there was a chair, and it had the Team Canada 78 sweater, which happened to be Rick Vives. And I pointed and I said, you remember that? And the only thing I pointed at Gretzky was, because that was the last time they wore the blue crest, the only time. And Gretz said, well, yeah, that was a great moment. He thought I meant it was his sweater. He said, but I got a better story for the seriograph above that by Leroy. And I said, do share. And he said, well, Leroy came to a lot of our games back in that day. And when that happened, that event happened, one of the greatest sporting events of all time, he said he was in the green room and he was talking to Luc Robitaille. And he said to Luc, do you want me to do something to commemorate this evening and this event? And Luc said, absolutely. He says, well, leave that with me. I'll come up with something for you guys. So about 6 months later, he has an event and they have a dinner. And he presents Wayne with that painting and gives it to Wayne. And then he gave every player a copy. And then he handed every player a bill. And they're all looking like, and Wayne by this time is telling the story bent over laughing, because if you look at the print, it says this print was done by Leroy Neiman, commissioned by the LA Kings. Well, they didn't commission him. They thought he was doing it for free. And then he charged them all, and I had to pay for it. So fast forward a couple years, and Eric Bloom, who was the sculptor who did Legends Row at the front, he was visiting. We were telling some stories. I told that story, and he said, it's funny, Leroy Neiman, I knew him, and that sounds just like Leroy. He said, as a matter of fact, he tried to get Muhammad Ali. When Muhammad Ali came back from Zaire, he phoned and he said, Leroy, would you like me, or, Muhammad, would you like me to do something for you to commemorate the fight? And he said, why are you calling me Leroy? I said, well, no, do you want me to do something to help you with, I'll do something commemorative. And he goes, you don't need to call me Leroy, you don't need to call me. And he knew, because he had got him before in another painting, and he wouldn't break for him. He said, if you want to do something, you do it on your own. And off he goes. So anyway, that one little piece that we had on the wall had like I like to say, every piece has tentacles, and the one story just leads to another and just keeps going and keeps going. And here's this piece on the wall. Gretzky has this great story he tells us, and then all of a sudden, fast forward, and then Eric Bloom tells the same story featuring Muhammad Ali. So now this thing has a whole life of its own, and it can continue from there.
That's a great story. I love that. And, you know, another one that I want to bring up, and I don't know if you recall this, is, you know, people know the name Bill Barocco. He's great in the Toronto Maple Leaf folklore. You know, the tragically song 50 Mission hat.
Tragic hip song. Yes.
And, you know, the first time I was in your basement, there was a wonderful lady down there, and that happened to be the sister of Bill Barocco.
That's right.
Can you tell a little bit about the Bill Barocco artifacts you had?
Well, that was a very emotional day because the family came, the sister came, the nephew came, the uncle came, and we had this event, and we had the program from the last game, a ticket stub, and I had a letter that was written by his brother Alex asking for tryouts for him and Bill to some professional teams, and it had been sent out. Well, they'd never seen any of this. So here was the sister, and the funny part is I came around the corner, and where this was on display in the cabinet over by the Maple Leaf door, she was standing there reading the letter, which I pulled off the wall to give her, and she's looking at the program, and the tears are streaming down her face. So it's one of those moments where you'd want to go up and ask her all kinds of questions, like, did you help him write this letter? But it was just one of these moments where I just felt, you just leave them alone and let them enjoy it as a family. And so it was a very moving moment, and you don't realize as somebody who has these items what it means to the families. And years later, we had George Armstrong come over with his family, and we had the girls and the boys, and they were all there, and we had George's original contract. And George, who's not noted for speaking, hit the front door of our place and didn't stop talking till he left. And he said, you know, Mike, I said, George, I thought you didn't talk to anybody. He goes, when I'm like this, I'm a superstar. But you stick a microphone in front of me, I can't talk. And he just went on, so he was telling us all these stories, like he said, the contract and the rumor that Conn Smythe had to sign his first contract because with his mother because he was too young. He said, that was a pile of garbage. I signed my own contract. That was all him just promoting everything. And the family hadn't seen any of these items. So what we did for the Barocco family and the Armstrong family, we had copies made and we gave them to them. They really appreciated that. And so it's just these little things that we take for granted. And I know I'm going on here a little bit, but one of the things I consider myself was just not a collector. I just looked at myself as the gatekeeper to these items, and all I'm doing is passing the legacy of these people along to the future people and to future generations. And I took it as an honor to try and share this with people. And they appreciated it over time. And that's one of the great things we took away from having this room.
We could talk all day about the different parts of the collection, which are fascinating, but I want to transition a little bit because not only do you have stories about your collection, but you have stories about a great and unique experience, which was attending every Toronto Maple Leaf game a few years ago. So first of all, I want you to talk a little bit about what led to that idea or the concept of going to every game and what that experience was like, and then maybe after that we can talk a little bit about the book. So.
Well, with the collection, we used to get contacted by a lot of people, and people asking for advice on certain items, what they were worth, what they should be collecting, would I like to buy it, and so on. And we would always answer everybody. And then once the collection goes to leave, what is next? And what we started thinking was, what it is that drives Maple Leaf fans. I mean, here's a team that hasn't won in so many years, and yet people will die-hardly follow this team. They'll drive from Winnipeg to Minnesota, 5.5 hours, and sit in a rink and cheer for this team. And everywhere they played, there was fans. What is it about this team that's such an attraction? So I thought I'd love to find that out. And it just so happens I'm a big Notre Dame fan, and there was a guy I met that graduated from Notre Dame in 1977 and has not missed a game since. And I thought I should do something like that with the Leafs. And Deb and I talked about it, and she said, go for it. So we put this together. And it was 2018-19. And everybody says when he signed John Tavares, that made the story even better for you. And I said, well, actually, in a way, it took away from what I really wanted to focus on, and that was with the Leafs struggling and why these fans were in the building still coming to watch these guys. But the Tavares part did make it fairly interesting. So anyway, we planned it all out when the schedule came, and I hit the road, and we had this whole, scope we do or script we would do every game, where I would do these certain things, meet people, interview them, and kept this all together. The Toronto Sun contacted me, and I did a story for them on a weekly basis with the help of Lance, by the way. And it just went from there, and people got to know who we were. I was getting interviewed every time I went into a city as the story gained some traction. And it was just amazing how people would share their love of the Maple Leafs. But it wasn't so much from a fandom love. It was more about, because the game's being like on the radio from the 30s, families back in that generation, it was the only form of entertainment. So families would sit around the radio and listen to Foster Hewitt's voice relaying the Maple Leaf games. Then the war recordings that went over that, you know, entertained the troops, gave them motivation to continue on. It was just something about this DNA in the family, and it just bonded the families together. So going to these games in all these Western provinces and these Western cities, it was more about going and representing their families and just preserving their heritage from the family, from the Maple Leafs, as opposed to going and watching them win or lose. They wanted them to win, of course, but it was more along just maintaining that tradition. And it was really ingrained in people where they would plan weddings, funerals, birthdays, or any event around the Maple Leaf schedule. And there was Maple Leaf private clubs, you know, bars in cities like Washington, New York, St. Louis, particularly in the West Coast in California, and basically every city. In Vancouver, the Regal Beagle is a famous bar. It's all Maple Leafs, and they watch every game together there, and the place is packed. And it was just quite amazing watching it and experiencing that over that season. And I'll tell you, it just flew by. And I had so much help and support from people along the way, and the Leafs were wonderful in helping me, gave me, I went to every morning skate. I didn't go to any of the press conferences, which I thought it wasn't my place. And the players were good because they started to know who I was after a while, and they'd wave at me. And the fans were great because, you know, could interview people, and they just got some wonderful stories. So with the help of Lance again, I documented everything, and I wrote a book, and it's called The Ultimate Road Trip. And in it, the big thing I did, though, I put down all the costs, everything it took to get there. You know, I took buses, I took trains, we took planes, I drove, I sat in the cheapest seats. We tried to get a deal in every hotel, all that stuff, so to make it look like it was a real trip, and it was.
You know, I think any Toronto Maple Leaf fan would have loved to vicariously live through you by going to all those different locations to see the Leafs play in different venues. And I guess I can share that I was fortunate to be, I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, that I was there with Mike for a couple of the games when the Leafs came to play against the Carolina Hurricanes. And what was great for me is I got to experience a little bit what Mike was seeing from the fact that he got to see people tailgating before the game, wearing Toronto Maple Leaf jerseys. But the cool thing was him going up and basically kind of saying, tell me about your story. Why are you a Leaf fan, you know, here in Carolina, or was it Minnesota or San Jose? And to hear the stories, it was just a lot of fun.
Well, it was, and the funny part is I'd have these kids come up to me and go, oh, you're just some rich guy driving around and doing it, and how much is this costing you? And I said, well, you know, by the time it's all done, you're probably looking at $45,000. And he said, oh, you know, you're just some crazy rich. I said, wait a minute, how old are you? Well, I'm 24. I said, well, I'm 63. So guess what? I worked for 40 years. You work for 40 years and save $1,000 a year. That's less than $100 a month. And guess what? You got $45,000, and you can do the same thing. They went, yeah, I never thought of it like that. You're right. Yeah, so you can start now, guys, and do what I did. And then they go, yeah, actually, that makes kind of sense. And look where I'm sitting, by the way. You're sitting down here. I'm sitting up there in the nosebleed seats. And by the way, how'd you get here? You drove? I took the subway. They go, oh, yeah, you're right, Mike. So, you know, people then, I said, it's all in the book. I put all the beer prices. I put all the hot dog prices, programs, what everything costs, ticket prices. The funniest was in Las Vegas because I kept track of every 50-50 draw in the prizes. And in Vegas, it was 50-50, where except Vegas, it was 51-49 because the house never loses. So I thought that was pretty cool. But there was lots of fun stories like that along the way, too. And it was just an experience that I welcome other people to try and do at some point in their life. And I ran into a lot of people who would pick destinations every year and go to 2 or 3 games. They go to a football game with a hockey game attached to it, or some other event or a play. I saw one guy was going to New York to see a play, and we're going to see the Leafs play at the same time, and it was a young guy. And just stuff like that. And people, it's amazing how many people are doing this, but on a smaller scale.
I hope people buy the book, not only just for the stories, but as a great resource to know what they should do
100%.
when they go to each of the locations, right? It's tremendous value and great learning experience.
Well, and especially because I didn't write it. Lance helped me write it. So Lance made me readable, okay? So if anything, it's just like my first book, Inside the Room with Paul Pasco and Lance Hornby. I like to say to him, we had a donut line where I was the center, and there is no center in a donut. So you two are the outside wingers carrying everything.
So we talked a little bit about your collection and your passion for the Leafs and doing your experience as that travel.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and from a charitable standpoint, the things you're thinking about.
Well, right now, okay, so now I've converted myself into an appraiser, sports appraiser. So we do appraisals. We help people with appraising their collection for just straight value, for insurance purposes, for divorce, God forbid, if that happens to them, and things along those lines. But the other thing that I'm doing also, I have a podcast with Rick Vibe called Squid and the Ultimate Leaf Fan. We do a weekly stream. We've had over 125 players on our podcast, and our library is pretty good. There's some pretty funny stories there. And I'm also in the process of writing another book with Rick. We're doing a best of with Paul. And we're doing this best of our podcast and some of the funny stories you're going to see out there. But the thing we're most proud of right now is we're involved in a charity where I wrote this book. This book right here is called Beer League Hockey. And I play beer league hockey a couple times. Whoops. I play hockey 4 times a week, and beer league hockey, doesn't matter what age you are, 25, 45, or 65, the stories still remain the same. You know, the guys who don't come off the ice, guys who don't pass, the guys who won't pay for their, fees, but they're out dancing the night before, or the cheapskate, all those stories. So I talked to over 200 guys, wrote this book, and every dime in the book is going to charity. And what we've done is we're buying defibrillators and putting them in hockey rinks and community centers around the country, and we still do that. But what we've done is Mark Curtin, who used to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs, has ALS. He's in a wheelchair, he's got a breathing mask, and I remember when Mark was a 15-year-old kid trying out for the Wexford Raiders, our team, and cocky, blonde-haired, good-looking kid, but he could play. And he got away with it. And now I see him now, and it's heartbreaking. And so anyway, he had a charity fundraiser in February for ALS Super Fund. And what my wife and I, Deb, did, they asked us to be a part of this to help ask the NHL teams for packages and what they could auction off. And so what we did was we suggested game day packages with morning skates, meet and greet, maybe a dinner, and tickets to a game. And all 32 teams, and I remember seeing this in all our years of doing fundraising, donated something. And Kurtz was on the phone with these guys, and they did a phenomenal job. Then they asked us to price these things, so we did. Now, some of them didn't sell, so what we did was we bought them. And we bought probably 8. We bought 8, and 1 we've sold out to somebody. But the 8, and what we're going to do is this. We're now going to turn around and raffle them off, and this is where we need people's help, and we need you guys to step up to be eligible for the draw. And the draw is going to be when the NHL schedule is announced. We're looking to do it that week. All I want you to do, you buy one of these books for $20. That gets you a raffle ticket to win one of these prizes. And the prizes are it could be Colorado, St. Louis, Nashville, Minnesota, Philadelphia, and San Jose, which is a phenomenal one. And you got 7 chances to win one of those. You got to get there on your own, but everything else is supplied. And the Toronto Maple Leafs, everybody's been wonderful giving their gifts, but these are the prizes that we're going to be raffling off. Please, I want to sell 2,000 books. I've got about 500 spoken for already, and I was away, and I've just got back and started on this. I had somebody come in today and buy 150, and I'm going to speak at their golf tournament. That's in May. I'm speaking at a couple golf tournaments. I'm at an ALS family a fundraiser tomorrow night with 650 people. They think they're going to be able to sell 300 books. So we could use your help. A book for $20. It doesn't even get you a basket of wings and a Coors Light at a bar. It doesn't get you a beer at Scotiabank Arena. For $20, the book may stink, but you know what? You're helping change a life and maybe save a life. Please come over and see me at my booth. $20, I'll give you a ticket, fill it out, and you're in the draw.
Mark Curtin is certainly a great guy, and Mike, what you're doing to help raise awareness and funds for that cause is great. So thanks and congratulations for that.
Oh, yeah. How can you not help these guys? You just have to, because here he is in the condition he's in, and he's trying to help other people and put himself aside. And the young man we're going to help tomorrow night, he's 31 years old, and he's in a wheelchair with a mask. And, you know, you just look at them, and they're thanking me for helping them. And I'm thinking, well, you thanking me? Like, it's you. You guys are the guys that are making this all happen. And I can't tell you enough. He's here tomorrow afternoon. Daryl Sittler is one of those guys who stepped right up and volunteered his time and again for this, to help Kurtz and to help these guys. He ran an event last night at Brian Aaronworth. Frameworth is another big supporter of charities. And I think my son Mikey running around here today. Brian's not here, but the guys like that just make this so much easier for us to do these type of things. And all the Maple Leafs that have stepped in to help along the way. Brendan Shanahan, again, stepped right up. He sent me a pair of tickets for tomorrow night, a meet and greet, and also a game day skate that I'm going to auction off tomorrow, along with the big auction for these people. Or I'm going to raffle off, pardon me, tomorrow. I'm going to sell books for these guys. Listen, the NHL guys are it's the greatest league in the world. They're the greatest players in the world and greatest human beings.
Well, Mike, it's been great talking with you today. It's always great getting together with you.
Of course.
And, you know, people can come over and see you at your booth. They can buy a book. You've got some wonderful memorabilia and a couple stories to boot.
All the stories.
So they got to come over and see Mike Wilson at his booth, which is close to where the autograph signings are. And Mike, it's been great to talk to you again today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Sean.